Hey everybody, welcome back. I thought I'd come on, and unfortunately my video equipment's not working today. My video equipment, that sounds like I've got some fancy equipment. It's just a laptop, but it's down for the count. So I thought I'd come on and do an audio clip today about the concept of rumination and how we ruminate, how many of us ruminate in benzo withdrawal, what a common experience it is, what it is, why we do it, and really thinking about if it's useful and helpful for us, which the answer to that is probably no. And then what do we do about it? And so, to really kind of launch into the idea of rumination, let me just start by thinking about how we land at this process. So, whether or not you were put on a benzodiazepine for anxiety or panic, or you were put on for any number of reasons, right? The reality is that most of us going through benzo withdrawal actually experience many symptoms of anxiety. And again, stress and anxiety, although they're used oftentimes interchangeably, they're not the same thing. Stress is something that happens, and anxiety is our response to it, okay? So benzo withdrawal is a stressor that happens to us, and anxiety is potentially one outcome of how we respond to the stressor of benzo withdrawal. Now, is it any wonder that most of us or many of us respond to the reality of benzo withdrawal in our lives as in an anxious way? It's not, right? Because what underpins most of anxiety are three things: a fear of loss of control, a fear of loss of certainty, and a fear of vulnerability. And I don't know about you guys, but for me in my life, nothing to date until I went into benzo withdrawal brought more of a loss of control, a loss of certainty, and a fear of vulnerability to my life. So it's no wonder that my reaction and my response to this kind of unwelcome intruder in my life, benzo withdrawal, has been this kind of anxious response. And I know I talk about Claire Weeks all the time. I'm going to bring her back in today because I just don't think there's a way to talk about this without talking about her. And one of the things that I love about Claire Weeks is she very much normalized what she called nervous suffering back then, decades ago, that we now call anxiety or an anxious state. And she talked about what breeds anxiety is a sensitized system. People that don't have a sensitized system tend to not really respond to the world or their situations or circumstances in an anxious manner. And we can become sensitized by all sorts of reasons, through chronic stressors like bad marriages or being in a relationship with people that, maybe have alcohol or drug addiction problems, work stress. More acute situations can bring it, like health situations like we're going through. And for many of us in benzo withdrawal, we meet criteria for both having kind of chronic stress and acute stress situations that have brought us here. The acuity of landing in a very complicated benzo withdrawal, the chronic stress of how long it takes while we're in it, maybe the stressors that led us to get on the benzo to begin with, if that's how it started for you. So again, she talks about this sensitized system, and I've talked about this in many other videos, and I look at it like a sensitized system is like a tin can, versus an unsensitized system is like a big fluffy bed. And since we're sensitized in benzo withdrawal, things that come our way, thoughts, feelings, sensations that come our way, hit that tin can like a penny that's being dropped into it, right? With a loud rattle and an uncomfortable sound. You drop that same penny onto a fluffy bed, and it doesn't make much more than a sound, if that. So again, this is an entry into why we ruminate is because, first of all, we are dealing with most likely an anxious response to a stressful situation, and our system has become sensitized as a result of being in this chronic and acute stress, depending on how we land in benzo withdrawal. And Claire Weeks, and I've talked about this again, but I'm going to say it one more time, talks about a trajectory that happens in developing an anxiety disorder or back then, and nervous suffering. And to me, this is very appropriate for so many people that I talk to, for sure myself. And it begins with what she calls indecision, that moves into suggestibility, that moves into a loss of confidence, that moves into a sense of personality disintegration where we don't really feel like ourselves, feel fragmented, to feelings of unreality that we now call depersonalization or derealization, that moves into an obsessive mind that kind of gets sticky and stuck on things, that then moves into, because we're so internally preoccupied, we move into an apathy. We stop caring about the outside world so much. We're so focused on our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, and how do we get ourselves out of this mess. And then this can lead to a depression and a depletion. And in benzo withdrawal, I think there's a depression that can happen on the neurotransmitter level of literally being depleted of serotonin and dopamine. But there's the depletion model of we've been struggling with this internal preoccupation, this loss of confidence, feeling like we don't know where to turn, who do we trust, what's happening to our bodies and minds, what's happening to our sense of selves, what's happening to our families. And we become, again, so internally preoccupied that we become depleted and feel this form of depression as a result. And again, if you just think about those things and you think about benzo withdrawal, it all makes sense, right? The indecision, we don't have hardly any guideposts in this except for the people that have come before us in terms of knowing how to manage this. And so there's a lot of indecision. Do I tape or do I cold turkey? All those things, which moves to suggestibility, right? Which is, well, what are you doing? What is that person doing? And I don't know. And we become even suggestible to ourselves. I don't know that I'm going to heal. We lose our confidence. We get more fragmented. DP and DR come in where we don't really feel like the world is real, or that we don't feel kind of real and coherent in ourselves. And then it lands in this obsessionality. And this is where I want to stop for a second, because this is where the ruminations can come in, okay, is in this obsessionality. And I think our obsessionality, for me at least, it started with kind of the obsession of, oh my God, I'm in benzo withdrawal. So what is kind of an obsession? An obsession is something that provokes a negative response or emotion. It can be a disturbing thought or a feeling, a sensation, an experience, a memory. Realizing we're in benzo withdrawal can create that disturbing emotion and thoughts and feelings and sensations, right? And the compulsion is what we do in an attempt to control or get rid of this disturbing experience, okay? And so a lot of us in benzo withdrawal, you've heard of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'm not diagnosing us because I'm actually against diagnosing us with things while we're in benzo withdrawal, because we meet criteria for so many physical and mental problems while we're going through it. But for the sake of understanding why we ruminate and what that means in benzo withdrawal, I'm going to talk about this kind of OCD-like process that so many of us get stuck in benzo withdrawal. So again, there's the obsession, which is, and I want to stop here because we tend to use this word wrong. I think a lot of times in our vocabulary, we're saying, oh, I'm obsessing about this, I'm obsessing about that. It's actually not a verb. An obsession is really a noun. It's the thing that has happened that is provoking you to feel anxious or a negative feeling or a distressing emotion or thought. It's ruminating is the verb. So we actually, a lot of times we're saying, oh, I'm obsessing about this guy. You're probably ruminating about the guy, okay? The obsession might be, I don't know if this guy likes me. And that thought brings up a disturbing feeling in you, which then you begin to ruminate about that guy. Does he really like me? Maybe I should check with his friends. Maybe I should do this. What about this? And you start doing all this ruminating. But we tend to use the word wrong. We often use that we're obsessing about something. Again, I look at it as obsession is kind of the noun. It's what's happened. It's the event. It's the thought. It's the feeling. It's the sensation that you don't like. And then in response to that, we move into rumination, which is a form of compulsion. So again, OCD stands to obsessive compulsive disorder. Again, I'm not diagnosing, but just thinking about obsessing leading to a compulsion. And I want to talk about mental compulsions because I think that's a lot of what we do in benzo withdrawal. Some of us do some of the more behavioral manifestations of a compulsion. Those are things like what we see more in the movies and on TV, where people are checking or counting or touching a knob 3 times, or they've got to flick the lights 5 times. But I find that in benzo withdrawal, we're doing a lot more of what we call mental compulsions. Rumination is a form of mental compulsion. Okay, and I'll come back and speak about that. But some other forms of mental compulsions that we do, and we do these compulsions in an attempt to try to control and get rid of what is bothering us, the obsession. Okay, oh my God, I'm in benzo withdrawal, or oh my God, there's that thought again, or oh my God, there's that heart palpitation again. So there's the obsession, there's the thought, the thing that's bothering us, and then there's what we do to try to get rid of it, okay? And this takes all kinds of shapes and forms. A big one for us, a big mental compulsion that we engage in is reassurance seeking, where we're, constantly asking, are we going to be okay? Am I going to survive this? How much longer? How long is this? Another form is like replaying or reviewing. I know that I have replayed and reviewed in my mind 1,000 times how I landed on benzos and beating myself up over that. And if only I hadn't gone to that urgent clinic to get that antibiotic, if only I'd read the research earlier, if only I'd found benzo buddies before I took the benzo. It can take the form of remembering or comparing, remembering who I was before the benzos. There's the me before, there's the me after, and staying stuck in this kind of mental reverie and mental space, mental function, comparing myself to other people who are not on benzos or who are on benzos, wishing or praying or meditating. These are all forms of mental compulsions. Now, they don't have to be. So, for example, if prayer is an important part of my life and I pray every day because it's an important building block of something that I value, my relationship with God or a higher power, and I'm doing that because it's a part of who I am, it's a part of my self-care, it's a value that I have, that's different than if I am feeling like, oh my God, there's that thought again. Oh God, here's the heart palpitation again. Oh God, I'm still in benzo withdrawal today. Dear God, please take this away. Please take this away. And we're checking to see if that distressing event has reduced or been eliminated. That is where prayer becomes a compulsion. Same thing with meditating. If I meditate every day because it's part of my self-care regime, there might be a very positive byproduct to that over time, where maybe I am less obsessional, I am less distressed by my situation. But if I'm meditating to get rid of something, if I'm meditating to get rid of a distressing feeling event, I'm trying to minimize my symptoms of benzo withdrawal, then I'm probably doing it in a compulsive way, okay? So again, we can go about things like, for example, reassurance seeking, right? You can go on the boards to feel a part of twinship and community and normalcy, or you can go on the boards to be like, okay, I'm typing in these symptoms, who's like me or who's not like me, or am I going to be okay? You had palpitations when you were 11 months off. What did you do, right? And we can, again, it's the function of what we're doing. If we're going on the boards and the function is to do something positive for ourselves and learn something and add something to our experience, that's different than if we're going on the boards with this sense of urgency to get rid of a feeling, to bind our anxiety in some way. And this is where rumination comes in. And rumination is another mental compulsion. And it makes up a lot of different things. Rumination can be worrying is a form of rumination, brooding over things. Why me? Why this? Why now? Monitoring our symptoms, monitoring ourselves all the time can be a form of rumination. Problem solving can be a form of rumination. Trying to seek insight can be a form of rumination. And again, it's the function, right? So for example, you know, part of my problem, and part of, I think, the problem for many of us with rumination in this, is that it kind of worked at one point. So, for example, it was probably through my brooding and my problem solving, and my just compulsively problem solving, what the hell is the matter with me, that I stumbled upon some Facebook groups and benzo buddies that showed me what was really wrong with me and showed me a taper process. So my rumination in some way got positively reinforced. It worked for me in that instance, okay? But the problem is, in general, across the board, rumination doesn't tend to work. Brooding, worrying, monitoring, problem solving, and all the other ones I mentioned, wishing, praying, meditating, reassurance seeking, reviewing, replaying, all of these things, they tend to not work. Okay, they might work for a moment, they may work once or twice, but they are not a good solution. Okay, and so this is where we get really stuck in this kind of OCD-ish process in benzo withdrawal, because again, there's so many things that that are causing us distress, whether it's a intrusive thought, whether it's just the reality of how much pain we're in and what we're losing, and our fear of all this uncertainty and control and vulnerability. We have all kinds of feelings and sensations in withdrawal that are distressing, that we can get kind of fixated on and say, you know, I don't like that I think this thought. I don't like that I'm having this sensation in my stomach. I don't like that I have this band around my head. I don't like that I can't connect to people. I don't like that I feel so disconnected from the world. And then, as a result, as an attempt to try to get rid of it, that's when we move into these mental compulsions. Hey, am I okay? Do you think I'm going to be okay? That's the reassurance seeking, problem solving, researching over and over and over. And I don't know about you guys, but, you know, like, for example, when I was going through a really tough patch and I had really bad intrusive thoughts, I would type intrusive thoughts into that search bar in Benzo Buddies literally sometimes 20 to 30 times a day. Well, there was nothing new to learn. Nobody was posting 20 or 30 times a day something new about intrusive thoughts. And that's where I knew, you know, I wasn't just trying to kind of solve a problem, you know, a one-time deal. Let me learn about, you know, intrusive thoughts, and then let me do something different about them. No, I was stuck in this OCD loop of, I hate this thought, I hate this is happening, and I need to keep going back in and researching more and doing more, trying to get rid of something. And here's the thing with anxiety and all of its manifestations, including obsessions, including all these distressing thoughts, feelings, and sensations that we have in benzo withdrawal, is that once we know we're in benzo withdrawal, we then have to work to accept that we are in benzo withdrawal so that we can stop looking for the myriad of 1,000 other things that are probably going wrong. What's really important is that we do have to get a certain amount of reassurance, right? So, for example, you might have heart palpitations and you might need to go see a cardiologist and be told your heart is actually fine, the muscle is actually fine, and your palpating is a form of your anxiety and your nervousness that we know is a result now of this benzo withdrawal. Well, at that point, then researching beyond that excessively is a form of rumination, okay? You're trying to get rid of it. And this goes back to something I always talk about, which is that beach ball, right? If our benzo withdrawal and all of its various symptoms, thoughts, feelings, sensations are this thing that we hate, that we don't like, it's scaring us, it's making us feel uncertain, it's making us feel loss of control, it's making us feel vulnerable. We want to get rid of it, so we keep pushing it down. But like that beach ball into the water, it keeps popping us back in the face, right? So what we need to do when we're ruminating, when we're brooding, over problem solving, over monitoring, trying to constantly seek for new information, is we have to develop a new relationship with our mind. A lot of times in this, we're focused on what strategies can we use. Well, sometimes tools and toolkits can be helpful, but I find for me, that the golden hammer in my toolkit is this allowing and accepting of the state that I'm in. okay? And if I can get there, that is a shift in my attitude. It's a shift in my relationship to benzo withdrawal. I'm no longer fighting that I'm in it. I'm no longer fighting that sensation, thought, or feeling. I'm allowing and accepting it to be there. I don't like it. I don't want it. I didn't choose for it to be there, okay? And I don't have much control over the fact that it's there. And that's an important distinction about obsessions and compulsions too. With an obsession, that experience, that distressing thought, feeling, or sensation is there. It's on you. You didn't cause it. But we do have control over the ruminations. And a lot of times we feel like we don't. It's so automatic. It's become so habitual for us to reassurance seek, for us to brood, for us to research, for us to sit for hours and kind of, again, get so internally preoccupied with our situations that we lose touch with reality. And we begin to feel like we have no control over that. But mental compulsions are actually a choice. There is, when we can get that space between, like I always talk about, that space between the stimulus and response, there is choice. And every time that you are reviewing, replaying, reassurance seeking, wishing, praying, meditating things away, worrying, brooding, monitoring, ruminating, you are making a choice. It doesn't feel like it because it's become so habitual, it feels automatic. But that's the important distinction for us to make. And one thing that I would want you to pay attention to that can be kind of a guidepost or a signpost for you in this is the sense of urgency. So if I'm sitting with myself one day and I decide to get on Benzo Buddies or a Facebook group because I just, kind of want to be in connection with some other people, okay, that's fine. If I'm sitting in my bed and I have this overwhelming sense of urgency, that I'm terrified of my own mind, I'm in chemical terror, I don't know what's wrong with me, I feel like I'm going to lose my mind, I feel like I'm spinning out of control, and I log on in this sense of urgency to try to get rid of that feeling, okay, then I am engaging in a compulsion. I am engaging in a rumination, in a compulsive act to get rid of something. And by default, what I can guarantee is it will do the opposite. I may feel better for 5 minutes or a half an hour, but ultimately it will come back, and it will probably come back with a vengeance. So the good news about that is when you feel that urgency, that is actually your cue to say to yourself, I now am at the fork in the road and have a choice. I can go towards mental compulsions like ruminations or reassurance seeking or trying to pray something away or meditate it away, or I can move towards slowing down and accepting and allowing, I don't feel so good right now. It is what it is. I got what I got. I don't, and it really is that fork in the road and that shift in attitude of I can fight this and maybe feel better for a minute and then worse 5 minutes from now, or I can accept and allow in that this feeling, this thought, or this sensation is here. It is distressing, it is highly uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous. I am not going to die from this. This is not going to kill me as much as it feels like it is. And I have a choice then in my response, in my relationship to my mind in this moment. And I'm going to choose to do something different. And I'm not, and an important point too is we talk a lot about distraction in benzo withdrawal, but distraction can also be a compulsion. It can also be that mental compulsion. So for example, if my distressing obsessive moment is, oh God, I feel that weird chemical anxiety coming over me again. Quickly, I need to go in and start crocheting like crazy or cooking like crazy to get rid of that thought. That is a compulsion versus I'm going to actively choose to go and stop looking at the withdrawal channel for a minute and turn on a different station. Not to get away from something, make it go away, please, 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 and we're always checking to see if it's still there. But in saying I'm going to put my attention and my gaze elsewhere. I heard a great example of this, and it was talking about the difference between kind of awareness and then attention and focus. And this is a really important thing for us to remember as we're ruminating or mental compulsing. So imagine like a security camera that's installed on a building, and it's just oscillating back and forth, looking around the grounds, right? It's just picking up data, okay? And that's where we want to be with our benzo withdrawal. We just want to be in the awareness of, okay, I have that sensation, I've got that feeling, now that thought's coming in. But what happens to us is we then move into this, again, kind of compulsion and this paying attention and focusing. And this is where we take that security camera, we focus it on a particular place on the grounds, we zoom in on it, we start snapping pictures of it, and we're now completely preoccupied with that particular place, okay? And in doing so, we lose all other ground. We lose the rest of our experience, of our lived experience. This is where we start to look really preoccupied and internally preoccupied. It's where we start to lose, again, our five senses, and we're caught in the world of zooming in on this particular moment, this thing we hate, and then what are we going to do to try to get rid of it? Look at it, look at it, look at it. Now, how do we get rid of it, rid of it, rid of it? And that's when we get into that obsessive compulsive loop. And the more we ruminate, and the more we stay focused on something and trying to get rid of it, the more we're, again, in our imagination. We're usually in the future. I want to get rid of this so I can be here. Or why did this ever happen to me? And again, we're very much out of the present moment. And in the present moment, we get the choice to say, again, I'm feeling that sense of urgency come up. That's my cue that I get a choice here. I can go down the path of trying to get rid of this, knowing that I can't, or I can go down the path of allowing and accepting and saying, okay, it is what it is. And this is where I go back to that example I said on a recent video about the metaphor of kind of like the bum at the, I hate the word bum, but the bum at the buffet table. This is where we talked about you're throwing this elaborate party that you've been planning for months with expensive food and people you want to impress and friends you want to see. And everyone's having a wonderful time. And all of a sudden you realize there's this bedraggled, smelly intruder that is eating all your shrimp and crab and caviar. And you become fixated on this intruder. And the rest of your guests notice him, but they're having too much fun to really pay much attention. You can't get him off your mind. And suddenly, you go over, you try to get him to leave, he won't leave. Now you've got to decide, am I going to call the cop? But you're sitting there and hours are going by and you're thinking, oh my God, this guy is ruining my party. This is not what I wanted. This is not how I wanted this to go. I've got to get rid of him. How do I get rid of him? Why is he here? And the hours tick by and you're not enjoying your guests, the food, the music, the drinks, the whatever. And you've become fixated. Your security cameras become fixated on the bum at the buffet. And you've lost sight of the rest of that party. And this is what happens to us over and over again in benzo withdrawal. I know it does for me. I wake up and I feel depressed, and suddenly I'm fixated on that depression. Will I always feel depressed? Why do I feel depressed today? Did I do something wrong? Did I eat something bad? Did I do something different? And I'm fixated on it. Well, what happens? Does that depression go away? Usually not. Usually it gets worse. Or I wake up and I'm in terror or panic, or I have a headache, or I feel disconnected from the world. And the more that I zoom my camera in on that and ruminate on it, problem solve, brood on it, overly attentive to it, usually it doesn't go away. Usually it gets worse. And so I want us to remember a couple things. Again, that distress doesn't equal danger. Once we've realized we're in benzo withdrawal, we've taken some steps to manage our benzo withdrawal, whether that's we're off the meds safely or we're coming off with a taper, does not mean we're going to be comfortable. We're going to feel a lot of distress, but that doesn't necessarily equal danger. The second thing is to recognize when we feel that urgency, that is an invitation. It is an invitation to move into compulsions and ruminations. We don't want to take that invitation. Or it is an invitation to say, okay, it is what it is. Not feeling so good right now. I'm going to allow this to be, and I'm going to stop fighting it. And in the fight, that anxiety will ultimately reduce. Okay, things will eventually calm down. Okay, but the more we fight this, the more we are actually guaranteeing that it's going to stick around and it's probably going to feel worse. Okay, and then the third point is that we're really looking at not so much strategies, but developing a new relationship with our minds, a new relationship with our benzo withdrawal. And again, accepting and allowing is not saying I'm okay with this, I like this, I wanted this. It's saying it's here. It is what it is. Okay, I didn't ask this intruder in to eat at my buffet table, but he's here nonetheless. I can kick everybody out and end the party early. I can call the cops and make a scene, or I can do my very best to try to healthfully engage in something else. Not as a way to get rid of him, but as a way to not let that be my sole focus and ruin my night. So, again, rumination is a form of mental compulsion. Again, I mentioned many other forms of mental compulsions, and we do these things naturally and of course because we're trying to get rid of this obsessive, distressing thought, feeling, or event. The problem is, just like in OCD, it stays in a feedback loop of OCD and things don't get better. Okay, so we have to change our relationship to our distress so that we don't move into all these forms of mental compulsions and get stuck here. Hopefully that was clear, and but I felt like it was important because it's happening on a day where I've been really needing to focus and think about my own wide array of mental compulsions that I use in benzo withdrawal and how they keep me stuck and how they actually make me feel worse. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Thanks.